I would tell you that Marquis' monologue about the Hall of Fame that you just heard, I will be posting that on our 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page. It'll be courtesy of Medium later on in the day. So if you missed that, you can read it. And your thoughts on that, certainly invite you to comment and such, both on Facebook. Like us on Facebook, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. We've got almost 500 members of followers on Facebook. By the way, something else that came out, news going on concerning ETSU, because ETSU is going to, what with us having Scott Carter come on and ask him some tough questions about the football search and really the culture at ETSU that I'm looking forward to talk to him. But ETSU released their baseball schedule for the upcoming season. It begins with Northern Kentucky, who is becoming more of a rival than I think anybody who follows ETSU athletics ever thought they would become. But the two games, the series there that I thought were very intriguing concerning ETSU athletics, the two teams, big-name teams that they are playing, and one is Tennessee. There will be 3 games with Tennessee this year, including one at the stadium that should be named after John Mooney. And then you will have also a road trip, and I thought that this was a big coup for the Buccaneers, to Tulane. Tulane is one of the better baseball programs, certainly on the schedule, but that is a very fair to Midland baseball program, Tulane. They've had success over the years in baseball against, for instance, the LSU Tigers, which are regarded as one of the great baseball programs. Looking at the schedule that comes out here, it begins at home in Johnson City, February 16th, against Northern Kentucky. After that, then they get to warm up by going down to Fort Myers and playing former Atlantic Sun rival, well, they're still an Atlantic Sun team, or the Florida Gulf Coast Eagles. They just don't have ETSU as a conference rivalry anymore. Then there's the Smokies tournament. This is played in Kodak. This is played at Smokies Park, home of the Tennessee Smokies, in Sevierville. And you have Tennessee, Middle Tennessee State, and Memphis and ETSU all converging on a baseball tournament in Sevierville. That's a nice, I mean, you're saying, geez, I've always wanted to go to Gatlinburg. I'm trying to get away to Gatlinburg. Well, there's your chance the first weekend of March. Of course, you somewhat wonder, is it going to be warm? Is it going to be warm? That sort of thing. The Buccaneers also have a game coming up at Tennessee in Knoxville on March the 20th. Boy, this is early for baseball. Yeah, they do that in college baseball. Now, for more both kind of big name or news opponents, Tennessee comes in Tuesday, April the 17th. After that is the aforementioned road trip, April 20th, 21st, and 22nd to New Orleans to play the Green Wave of Tulane. After that, the Citadel and Tony Skoll comes back in. That's in the first weekend of May. And the season concludes before the Southern Conference Tournament, May 19th, right when the major leagues are just getting underway, against the Wofford Terriers at Wofford. And then there's the Southern Conference Tournament, which will be played in Greenville, South Carolina, on May the 22nd. So there you are. We have, that's the ETSU baseball schedule. And remember, Scott Carter is coming up in just a few minutes. The other thing that I wanted to move on to after the ETSU baseball schedule to talk about are, the football game last night with the Dolphins really upsetting the Patriots. And I mentioned this. This means now that the game in Pittsburgh on Sunday afternoon between the Patriots and the Steelers, which is a series that the last 14 times the Patriots have absolutely dominated, winning 11 of 14 games. the last meetings, and in fact, one of those losses was when Matt Castle was quarterbacking the Patriots 10 years ago. So Tom Brady has had the Steelers' number time and time again, but what happened, yesterday makes you wonder. Especially when you saw what happened with the Steelers on Sunday night at home against the Baltimore Ravens, in which at one point, I'll say this to the Patriots, if they want to win, don't fall behind by 14 points. Sounds like a pretty good strategy in any football game, and I was stunned to learn the statistic that the Pittsburgh Steelers, dating back to 1933 when they were the Pirates pros, dating back to the days when they were the same old Steelers, and usually at the bottom of the NFL, dating back to the days where it took the franchise 10 years to score 28 points in a game, dating back to the years when it took them, 40 years to not only win a division, but to win 10 games in a season. All that era, they would always get up by 14 points, they're still going to win. And then after that, after Dan Rooney said it in his Hall of Fame induction speech, before we got Franco Harris, we never won. After we got him, we never lost. Which is pretty accurate. And so the point here is that we have a circumstance in which don't fall behind 14. The Ravens were up by 14. I started to say, boy, the Steelers are going to throw this ball game away. They put that stat up. Roethlisberger scored the touchdown to get him back, or threw the pass to get him back here. Or was it the pass, or actually, I guess it was Le'Veon Bell on 3rd and 6, getting the 10-yard touchdown run against the Patriots, against the Ravens last Sunday. And I said, wait a minute, this has the makings of a comeback, and certainly a last-minute Chris Boswell field goal won the game for the Steelers. But here's the problem. As we look to this game of the week in the NFL, the last 3 games the Steelers have all won on last-second field goals. And if you listen to Colin Cowherd, you know what he has to say about point differential, and there's something to be said about that. The Steelers have played to the level of their opponents many times this year. Now, maybe that means victory against the Patriots. Hey, they're a pretty good opponent. If they play to the level of the Patriots, then they'll win. And I think everybody who roots for the Steelers would love a 1-point victory against the Patriots. If I tell you right now, I can assure you a 1-point victory against the New England Patriots, every Steeler fan is going to sign up for that. They'll also know which way to bet, but that's neither here nor there. The Steelers, though, you look at this game, if they do win it, however, let's look at a team that would be creeping up into the postseason race, much to the chagrin of the fans around here that root for the Tennessee Titans, who have fallen a game back in the AFC South standings, to perhaps the surprise team of football, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and their opportunistic defense. If the Steelers win this game with the Patriots, I think it actually may make, depending on what the Jaguars do, the Jacksonville Jaguars legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Because then the Patriots would actually fall to the 3rd seed, assuming that both the Jaguars and the Patriots wind up with 4 losses on the season or remain tied. That would give the Patriots, assuming a Jacksonville victory this Sunday, 1 more conference loss and put the Jaguars into a position to get a bye in the playoffs. And if the Jaguars get a bye, even if they're the number 2 seed, and if they wind up having to, I guess they would, wind up playing the Patriots in their first game, that's telling. And let's also not forget that the Jaguars earlier this year went up to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers by 3 touchdowns. Ben Roethlisberger throwing 5 interceptions. For that matter, under the Mike Tomlin era of Steelers football, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yes, David Gerard was their quarterback then. It was some time ago, about 10 years ago, in fact. But they did go up to Pittsburgh and win a playoff game. It's happened. Jaguars and Steelers used to be a tremendous rivalry back in the 90s. They went to different divisions and it fell out of favor. Regardless, what you're looking at here is a circumstance in which that game may mean more Patriots, Steelers to the Jaguars than either one of the two teams that will be playing in it. After all, it's roughly a matinee. Yes, if the Steelers win, I don't believe they would clinch home field throughout the playoffs, but they'd have to really screw up. They'd have to lose to the Browns not to get it. They would be essentially assured of winning the first seed in the AFC. But does that mean as much to them as it does the Patriots, especially when the Steelers have had the first seed before and then have lost to the Patriots in Pittsburgh in the playoffs? We'll find out. I just look at this game coming up here, and it's everything you could want to see. You know that I'm going to be in front of the TV. On Sunday afternoon, Steelers and Patriots, I think as most of America will be. But, the game there, and I'll just reiterate, may actually mean more for the Jacksonville Jaguars than it will the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots. Just a thought. All right, I'm Marky Bilson. Remember, Scott Carter will be coming up. I want to thank people watching on Facebook Live. Adam Buckles, hello. I saw one time, I know this Rocky Malooly, one time ranked the 193rd ranked heavyweight fighter in the world. Rocky Malooly is tuning in here on Facebook Live. And I think I have this on my personal page. I have Joseph Charles, who owns 2 restaurants in Chicago. I know him. He is on Facebook Live. I want to say hello to him, a former baseball player at Illinois Chicago. John Rock, I believe, is tuned in. He, the former ETSU football player who his father coached the Oakland Raiders to their first Super Bowl. Hello, John. And many others to say hello and following us. We're going to take a break right now on Tri-City Sports Now. And when we come back, actually, are we going to take a break? Did we play all our commercials right now? And let's see here. Oh boy, isn't this wonderful? See what I've got? Yep. We've got the problem here. Our radio listeners just heard this horrible buzz, and that stemmed from the fact I don't believe that we are right now able to play bumper music. So there you go. So that's where we stand right now on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. One of the other things to discuss here, and I wanted to move into this, but we're not going to be able to take a commercial break, so I'll just keep it here for the rest of the hour on Tri-City Sports Now. The recruiting game. Of course, ETSU is looking for a new football coach. And by the way, if you follow us on Facebook, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities on Facebook, you will find that a list of coaching candidates, mentioned them yesterday on the show, but with a quick rundown of guys that I think could potentially be coaches at ETSU. Now, I also threw in there, just for old time's sake, Paul Hamilton, who I don't think is going to be the next football coach at ETSU, the former ETSU football coach, now working in the athletic department of Georgia Tech. But I did want to mention him, and I don't know, is it so far-fetched to believe that Scott Carter, now the athletic director of ETSU, who will be joining me in just a few minutes at the top of the hour, is it so hard to believe that he would hire his former coach to coach the Buccaneers again? Yeah, really it is. I wouldn't give it that much of a chance, but I did want to mention on the 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page just some of the accomplishments that were recorded under the Hamilton era at ETSU. He coached 7 years at ETSU, had 4 winning seasons. By ETSU standards, that's not bad. And in fact, and I've said this before many times, though in my lifetime, the ETSU Buccaneers have had a grand total of 3 seasons in which they've won 7 or more football games. In my lifetime. That's almost a half century. Not a half century old, no. I'm 46. Okay, there you go. In the last 46 years, 3 seasons of 7 or more victories. That's all. I mean, think about that for a second. So, one of those seasons was coached by Paul Hamilton back in 1997. Paul Hamilton, when he was the coach at ETSU, had 59 scholarships. Everybody else had 63 in a SoCon. Yet he had recorded 4 winning seasons in 7 years. Last 5 years were basically a going out of business sale for ETSU. Oh, I know, it wasn't until 2003 that they said the program would be shut down, but they gave a warning way back in 98. We're going to reevaluate this. We're going to cut costs. 98, ETSU had to play 2 money games. They had to travel to Miami and Mississippi State. They weren't going to beat either of those teams. And by the way, that was the year Mississippi State won the SEC West. Not surprisingly, Paul Hamilton lost 55-6 to Jackie Sherrill and company. But that was the year Mississippi State led eventual national champion Tennessee 14-10 in the 4th quarter. Okay? I mean, that was a good Mississippi State team. Wasn't a bad Miami team either. That was when Butch Jones, the start of when he was starting to turn the Hurricanes around. Nigel Davenport was a running back. They went on, of course, in 2001 to win the national champion. So, any freshmen that were playing in that game against ETSU, and since it was a blowout, I think 66-17, there were a few. I mean, the backups were eventually going to win national champions, become national champions at Miami. That's what ETSU had to face. You take those 2 games in 98 off the schedule, you put on, other Division I AA teams, which is what they called them at the time, now FCS. Maybe ETSU goes 6-5. And that would have been 3 straight winning records. 4 out of 5. And maybe a higher caliber of player comes to ETSU in that recruiting class. And maybe, since that would have been 1999, by the time they were seniors in 2002, that recruiting class wouldn't be going 4-8. And maybe, with another winning record, it would have been that much harder to shut down the football program at ETSU. So the going out of business sale for ETSU football, the demise really started not because of Hamilton, but due to the administrators, really above even Frank Pergolizzi and Kierner Fry, the athletic directors, that the bean counters started really grinding the axe, if you will, on ETSU football. That's where it all started. And so you have to look at this. The job that Hamilton did, often criticized, but perhaps better than usual. And I just mentioned that. And I know I went on a little bit there, but on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page, you can read the list of candidates. Went over them yesterday, as a matter of fact, and you'll be able to read who I think some of the candidates potentially are. I will ask Scott Carter coming up if any member of the current staff are be considered. But if they are, why haven't they been hired yet? And that seems to be the natural transition. If you're just going to hire somebody on staff, you would have hired them already. Why are you going to make them wait around all this time? I do wonder about the ETSU coaching search. There's the defensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I mentioned this yesterday. I don't really think he's much of a candidate. I really don't. That's Mike Smith, of course, greatest linebacker to play at ETSU, former Atlanta Falcons head football coach, had 5 winning seasons there out of 7 years. It'd be a major pay cut for him to come to ETSU and be the head coach. Be a tremendous lack of prestige after being defensive coordinator of the Buccaneers and being the NFL for almost, well, I guess it would be 17, almost, it would be 20 years, I guess he'd be there. Started as linebackers coach with the Ravens, Coach Ray Lewis. But I will say this about Mike Smith. What if they make a coaching change in Tampa? And even though Smith has a long-term contract as defensive coordinator, let's face it, new broom sweeps clean. New head coach, it's probably going to be a new defensive coordinator in all likelihood coming in as well. And then he's unemployed. Of course, that won't happen until the first of next year. I've never heard of any football program, however, saying, hey, you know what? Our coach is retiring, but he'll retire when we finally find a head coach. For the time being right now, he's the head coach. He will take care of the administrative duties, the recruiting, all of that. This is unprecedented. Why you wouldn't even have him step away and then have an interim head coach from the current staff to boost their resume, I don't know. Again, that's one of the questions I'll be asking Scott Carter here. And by the way, for people watching on Facebook Live, follow us. It'll be the 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page that I'll be broadcasting that on. Anyway, could my question be that be a sign that they're trying to hold out for a potential firing of a current pro coach, Mike Smith or otherwise? I don't know. But go to the Facebook page, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. You'll see my list of candidates, Donnie Abraham, some yay or nay on that, some assistants that other people aren't talking about. I know Scott Carter isn't going to be referring on specific candidates when I speak to him, but nevertheless, I think that there's something to be said. I want to ask him some questions about the coaching search as well. There's no longer a coaching search down in Knoxville. It's Jeremy Pruitt. But interestingly enough, it seems right now that it's Phil Fulmer doing the recruiting. Maybe that's to be expected. After all, Pruitt is still the defensive coordinator of Alabama, and he's got a month to prepare for Clemson, right? That's got to be where his focus is. Hey, that's what happened with Lane Kiffin when he was going to Florida Atlantic last year or so. You know, it's what happens. There's a national championship. They can't just have him leave the Alabama Crimson Tide with a national championship at stake, can they? No, I can't. So maybe you do have the athletic director do the recruiting at this time, especially when his name is Phil Fulmer, and he is a former national championship winning coach for the Volunteers. But that's just it. When Phil Fulmer last won a national championship, the players he is recruiting were not yet born. Now, I realize you can look at a history book and, there's a certain prestige in all this, but also let's face facts. Fulmer, man of prestige in Tennessee, but on a national, level, if we're looking at coaches of that era, the coaches that, maybe a younger generation, the current generation, would really know of from that era, it would be Spurrier who would make an impression. It would be Bowden. It would be Holtz. It would be Jerry Sandusky if he broke out of prison, but for reasons that we don't want to get into right there. But those would be the coaches that their names would be, let's just say, magic if they tried to incorporate themselves into a recruiting search. The circumstance right now comes out that recruiting isn't going so well. The early signing period is now only just a week away, 8 days, I guess, officially. But there are all sorts of, just put it this way, when Butch Jones was still on board as the head coach, Rivals ranked the Tennessee recruiting class for 2018 number 7 in the country. It's fallen about 30 places since then. There are more and more decommits. Even the big quarterback out of California, it looks like Nebraska is really trying to recruit him. And frankly, what with this is a problem for Tennessee. Do you go after a contemporary, one of the recruits right now? But how do you tell him you'll be my starter for more than just 1 year as long as Jarrett Guarantano or Will McBride come back? And then, if you bring in someone better, how do you keep Jarrett Guarantano or Will McBride? It's an age-old question. I mean, there's nothing new that I'm putting out here. But, yeah, the Tennessee Volunteers, for instance, just lost a third 2008 3 commitments just yesterday. I have a feeling December 20th isn't going to be kind to the Vols. But those recruits, a couple of Florida cornerbacks, really, like I said right now, I know that you don't know every player in Florida who is a high school football player and have, followed him. I know that. They have been lost. Let's see here. The Florida cornerback that broke away from commitment. The big news here yesterday as I pull this up, Jamarcus Chapman. Yeah, the name really doesn't mean that much. Actually, he was the third player. He was a Georgia high school defensive lineman. But then there were 2 corner that broke out away, and there have now been 16 decommitments from the Tennessee recruiting class. This does not bode very well for the Tennessee Volunteers. I'm sorry. I think this is a major, major rebuilding project that is going to be coming up. Schedule next year, if anything, I think it'll be tougher. The tough out-of-conference game is not Georgia Tech. It's West Virginia. And it's in Charlotte. I guess Georgia Tech was in Atlanta, but even so. It's not at home is the point. It's not at Neyland Stadium. There's also a road trip to Auburn. That's not necessarily like it was this past year when LSU coming to Neyland Stadium, that wasn't an easy game, but if anything, you go on the road now instead of host a tough SEC West opponent. The schedule actually is probably a little bit tougher. I mean, ETSU against Indiana State, that's cannon fodder game. They play UTEP and Charlotte. Those are cannon fodder games. The difference between that and, say, Southern Mississippi and Massachusetts, very little. Very little. Those are games they're going to win. Those are the 3 guaranteed victories on the Tennessee schedule next year. Problem is, there are no guaranteed victories after that. And when was the last time you could say that about Tennessee football? I don't think you could say that at all. So a major rebuilding project underway, I think, for 2018. Jeremy Pruitt, when he comes aboard full-time, he's got his work cut out. Then again, thinking optimistically, if Alabama does win the national championship, and he comes in middle of January, with a few weeks to recruit, that would be an appeal to a potential class of 2018. The only question is, how many players will still be around that could be SEC worthy at that point, with the early signing date? Scott Carter, he's the athletic director of East Tennessee State University. He's looking for a football coach, too. He's my guest coming up. Stay tuned on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. Follow us on Facebook.